Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're taking on a slightly different role. We are playing detective. But, we aren't looking for who committed a crime. We're actually hunting for missing pieces in existing human knowledge. When we look at published research, it's super tempting to just think, okay, case closed. But for a true researcher, a published paper is literally just a crime scene waiting to be reinvestigated.
So what remains unanswered? I really want you to let that sink in for a second, because absolutely every new scientific breakthrough, every major paradigm shift, it all starts by asking what previous studies missed. It's not about throwing away what we already know, it's about finding the blank spaces on the map. You see, progress doesn't come from just repeating known facts over and over. Progress absolutely demands that we actively seek out the void.
Section 1. The missing piece. Let's define what these deficiencies actually are.
So, research deficiencies. These are the weaknesses, limitations, inconsistencies, or gaps found in previous studies. Now, I know the word deficiency might sound like a pretty harsh critique, right? But in the academic and scientific world, it's actually a total goldmine. Finding these weaknesses isn't about being overly critical of past scientists. Actually, scratch that. It's more about recognizing that no single study can cover absolutely everything. Every piece of research has boundaries, and by identifying exactly where those boundaries lie, you find the exact coordinates to build something entirely new. You're basically looking for the structural gaps so you can pour a brand new foundation.
Think of these 4 questions as your ultimate detective's notepad. When a researcher reads a study, they're actively interrogating the text with these specific angles. First, what remains unanswered? Even if a study confirms a hypothesis, what new mysteries did it accidentally create? Second, what limitations exist? Maybe their equipment just wasn't precise enough or their sample size was way too small. Third, what populations were ignored? Did they only study men? Did they only look at college students? And fourth, what variables were completely excluded? Did they, say, test for temperature but completely forget about humidity? These 4 questions are the actual tools we use to pry open the cracks in existing literature to find a fresh research angle.
Moving on to Section 2, the 6 suspects. These are the specific types of gaps we're looking for, so let's line them up.
All right, our first suspect is methodological deficiencies. Let's say a previous study used only surveys to understand customer satisfaction. Now, surveys are great for sure, but they only give you self-reported numerical data. They really don't tell you the deeper why behind the answers. So the current study steps in to fix this gap by using mixed methods, combining those surveys with in-depth one-on-one interviews. By changing the how, the actual methodology, we're suddenly able to capture an entirely new dimension of reality that the previous researchers were just completely blind to.
Next up, a population deficiency. This happens when previous researchers focused way too heavily on one specific group. For example, if past studies examined luxury hotels exclusively, your conclusions about the hospitality industry as a whole are going to be severely skewed, right? So the current study steps in, shifts the target group, and investigates budget hotels instead. By simply pointing our magnifying glass at a completely different demographic, we unlock entirely new insights that those luxury-focused researchers completely missed.
Suspect number 3 is the geographic deficiency. And listen, location changes everything. Here we see previous research was conducted only in Metro Manila, which is a massive, highly urbanized metropolis. But if you take those findings and just assume they apply everywhere, you're making a huge mistake. To fix this, the current study focuses on Cebu province, which has a completely different economic and cultural landscape. Highlighting this geographic gap shows how a simple change in physical location can completely alter the research landscape. It basically proves that what's true in one zip code might be totally false in another. Suspect number 4, theoretical deficiencies. Now, this is where things get truly cerebral. Sometimes the gap isn't physical at all, it's conceptual. Previous researchers might have applied one theory only. Let's say they looked at employee behavior purely through the lens of economic reward. But as we all know, human beings are way more complex than that. So the current study uses a completely different theoretical framework. Maybe looking at that exact same behavior through the lens of social psychology or even team dynamics. Same data, same people, but a completely different lens. Viewing the exact same problem through a brand new framework often acts as a massive critical breakthrough.
Our 5th suspect is time deficiencies. Time waits for no researcher, right? And it creates gaps all by itself. Older studies simply might no longer reflect present conditions. Pre-COVID-19 research on hospitality practices might as well be ancient history now. The world changed practically overnight. So a current study that examines post-pandemic hospitality practices is filling a massive time deficiency. The previous research isn't necessarily wrong, it just expired. Time naturally opens up these massive voids in our knowledge that absolutely demand fresh investigation.
Which brings us to our final suspect, variable deficiencies. This happens when previous research ignored incredibly important variables. Maybe a past study tried to measure overall company productivity, but they completely ignored employee engagement. They measured the hours worked and the output, but just completely missed the morale aspect. So the current study comes in and ensures employee engagement is included. The crucial point here is that by adding a previously ignored variable, the researcher can crack the case wide open, proving that the original study was actually missing a vital piece of the puzzle all along.
Section 3. The payoff. Let's talk about why finding these deficiencies actually matters.
This four-step momentum you see right here, this is the heartbeat of scientific progress. First, identifying a research gap naturally justifies your new study. You have a concrete, targeted reason to investigate. Then, that justification establishes originality, which ultimately culminates in contributing completely new knowledge to the world. It's this beautiful, logical chain reaction where pointing out a flaw directly births a brand new truth.
Because at the end of the day, new knowledge doesn't start with what we know. It starts by finding what we missed. So the next time you read a seemingly flawless study, don't just passively absorb it. Instead, I want you to ask yourself, what truth is hiding in their blind spot? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember, always keep looking for the missing piece.